Welcome, everybody, to Connecting the Universe. I'm author and researcher Mike Ricksecker, back at you with another experience out of the secret library of the connected universe. So, why am I calling this an experience rather than the standard another class out of the secret library? Well, this is a pre-record. Holidays being as they are, this is the way that we really need to do it this evening or today or whenever you are actually watching this. Those that are listening to the audio version of this later, it's going to make no difference to you whatsoever. But I do encourage you, those that are listening to the audio version of this later on whatever podcast platform, to join us every Wednesday night, 8 o'clock p.m. Eastern Time, uh, on the Connect Universe portal, connectuniverseportal.com. Where we are usually broadcasting this live. Today, we're going to be talking about the secrets of underground civilizations. There's been a lot of talk about this lately. We covered it a little bit back in the summer, and we're going to get into that here, certainly, for just, well, a little bit to kind of preface this whole particular discussion. But I do want to encourage those that are watching, listening, again, every Wednesday night, 8 o'clock p.m. Eastern Time, connecteduniverseportal.com. So that is our membership platform. And aside from the weekly class that we have out there, you also have access to all of the material on the explorations in ancient Egypt, ancient Ireland, the American Southwest. There's so much back there. You get the monthly Q&A videos. There's the Mike's Morning Mugs. You have all kinds of exclusive articles and so much more material that is back there. Sneak peeks and behind the scenes of different projects that are going on. The people that get in first on all the great information, that's where you go. So invite you all out there. So, okay. I want to start this, though, before we get into the underground civilizations. Piece of news that came up here just recently. This morning, it is Tuesday, December 3rd. I just posted this to my social media. And it's basically an archaeological discovery. This is Alan Endicott. He's an independent archaeologist studying for a doctorate in archaeology at the University of Exeter in England. And he's had this theory for a while that he calls the sacred ark theory. And basically, this is the idea that all of these stone circles are interconnected. They're a part of a much bigger plan. And so the discovery here was a couple of Neolithic stone circles in Dartmoor. This is in England, southwestern England. That really helps to support the sacred ark theory. There are other structures found there, dolmens, cairns, things like that. Other things to go along with the stone circles, but and these are dated at least about 5,000 years old. And really, whenever we give that dating, we always throw at least, because that is the last dating that we're going to find. But it could go much older, of course. But yeah, he has this fantastic idea that all of these stone circles are a part of a much larger interconnected stone circle network. And so what's interesting to me about this is I was just having a conversation about this with my friend Catherine Swin, QHHT healer. Those who have read Portals to the Stars, you saw her featured in there. She came along with us to Egypt back this past spring. And she was out there hunting down different stone structures and things like this that had the cup and ring marks that we discussed there really toward the end of Portals to the Stars. And she was out there with her friend Mark, and they were having this sort of discussion about not just the cup and ring marks, but also the stone structures, the stone circles, these sorts of things, and how they all seem to be connected. So Catherine and I were having this discussion as well. And so now here is an article that pops up discussing this. And so I always find it interesting when we key in on something that is actually occurring in our world. It's what I call, eternal knowledge. It seems like people tend to tap into this sort of eternal knowledge all around the same time frame. You notice, I always throw this out as an example. You notice back in the 1800s, where all of a sudden everybody was trying to invent the light bulb. People that were in different countries, and remember, this is there's no email, there's no internet, there's um, snail mail across countries maybe, but these people did not have that strong of a connection to each other. But you had inventors all over the world at the same time, all of a sudden in a race to invent the light bulb. So somehow they all became inspired to do this thing. And I call that, well, like Carl Jung called it the collective unconscious. Some people call it the Akashic records and other different terms. I call it eternal knowledge because it is knowledge that is out there in the universe that is all ever present, and we just have to tap into it. Again, if going back to travels through time, my work there on time travel, if all time is concurrent, past, present, and future all exists, it means all the knowledge of the universe is right here with us right now. It is also concurrent. Okay, so we'll keep an eye on that as we go along, because that really does play into my work with portals to the stars. There is a chapter in there on stone circles, and there's also another chapter on energized Earth. So all of those things are very, very interconnected to the topics that we are discussing. Even when we're talking today with underground civilizations, these are cultures that would certainly be familiar with Earth energy, would be familiar with the ancient peoples that once were here with us on the land. These just happen to be underground. So we're going to revisit for a moment the Crypto-terrestrial hypothesis paper. It's a mouthful. People just call it the Harvard research paper, although there was a person from Montana that was also involved in this. This is the paper. So I have a couple of things I'm going to link here. One will be a blog article that I just wrote on underground civilizations. So that's connecteduniverse.substack.com. So that article is out there right now. We're going to be covering some of it here today. I'm also going to provide a link to the discussion that we had earlier this year, back in the summer, on this particular paper. And that was, what was it? Your grandfather's UFOs or something like that, that I titled that particular class. I don't think people really understood what the class was based on that title. But I did put in the title the Harvard research paper. In any case, I'm going to link back to that as well. So in this particular paper, Harvard researchers featured a quote unquote startling new claim that UFOs and extraterrestrials could be living underground on the moon or even walking among humans. So I covered this in Portals to the Stars. I've mentioned this book here a few times here. And what I said in there was I rolled my eyes and chuckled. Well, actually, I rolled my eyes and wrote a blog article. I can link back to that one too. And stated the idea that ETs are among us isn't the laughable part, it's the rest of it. While I appreciate the fact that academics are starting to take this field seriously again, this is absolutely nothing new, and the ideas aren't all that startling. So, what exactly did I mean by this? Well, let's consider the field of ufology, the study of UFOs. Ology, basically the study of UFOs, study of ufology, of UFOs as ufology. I throw that out there because in Portals to the Stars, I basically rip into people using the word symbology when they really mean to use the word symbolism. Thank you, Dan Brown, in the Da Vinci Code. That series of books, Angels and Demons and all that. But basically, yeah. So anyone who's really been following ufology for like the past 80 years, this is nothing new, okay? This is something that we've been talking about for decades. It's great that the government is taking an interest in these things lately, that you have academics jumping on board again. And that was the case, you know, late 40s, 50s, 60s. You had Project Blue Book, and the projects that preceded it, Project Sign, Project Grudge. All those were looking into and researching the UFO phenomena, and they're both mostly trying to debunk it. That's where J. Allen Hynek came into play, and even though he started off as a debunker, he began realizing that no, there's actually something legitimate going on here. But these are topics that were talked about back then. So this is really not new news, but it's wonderful that we are able to talk about it. We're able to have these discussions again. These different ideas get to be bandied about again, and maybe some fresher minds, some fresher takes on it, can maybe provide a little bit more insight. Maybe there's more details now that we can provide into this. Maybe in the middle of these discussions, new ideas, new hypotheses will come to light. We shall see. So yeah, back in Portals to the Stars, I covered this topic in a couple of different ways. First, discussing the possibility of interdimensional travel through stargates and portals. And then I explored some of our indigenous legends here in America about underground beings who saved humanity during the Great Cataclysm. So before we get into some of those specifics, the idea here of extraterrestrials walking among us, living underground, these sorts of things, you might not have to call them extraterrestrials, okay? Just because, okay, especially the ones living underground. If they have always lived underground among us, then they're not extraterrestrials at all. They're actually Earthlings, right? Yeah, it's there's another term that's been used before. So underground beings living within our dimension, you would pretty much call them Earthlings, or whatever race of beings they might be. You'd call them by whatever race they might be, right? But if they are on another dimensional plane from us, living alongside us in another dimension, then there's another term that we can use. And yes, you could use the term interdimensional beings. It's a bit wordy for the term that researchers in the 1960s came up with, like John Keel, Jacques Vallée, those guys, which was ultra-terrestrials. So in my books, I include a glossary. I don't know if anybody ever looks at it. Nobody ever says anything about, oh, hey, thanks for providing a glossary. I get comments on the indices that are in these books, like, oh, thanks for providing a lengthy index, or people go looking for things in the bibliography. Nobody ever says anything about the glossary, but I provide it anyway. So in Portals to the Stars, and I include this definition in a couple of the books that I have for ultra-terrestrials. They are superior non-human entities of natural or supernatural origin that are indigenous to planet Earth, living alongside us, even if we don't see or recognize them on a day-to-day basis. So yeah, the idea that you have other beings living in another dimension right alongside of us, could have some in this very room right now, but we don't see them on a day-to-day basis. So we would call them ultra-terrestrials. They would still technically be Earthlings if they're here on Earth. So, when would we actually call them extraterrestrials, right? Well, extraterrestrials are beings that come from another planet to Earth. Now, at some point, they are no longer extraterrestrials if they live here for many, many years. We've had reports of UFOs, UAPs, extraterrestrials. You could say decades, you could say hundreds of years. I'm on the show Ancient Aliens. You could say thousands of years into our very, very distant past. So at what point are they no longer extraterrestrials and they just become, again, Earthlings? Because, if they come here, they procreate, they have offspring. Those little extraterrestrial babies would now be native earthlings, right? So, just think about, okay, most of my ancestry comes from Europe, Switzerland, Germany, Poland, Hungary, Scotland. There might be some Austrian mixed in there. You never know what else. I don't. I say I have that in my heritage, but I don't call myself any of those countries. I don't call myself European. I'm an American. Okay. At some point, what was it, 2-3 generations? You would say you become an American. Your line becomes that. So at some point, extraterrestrials coming down here to Earth, staying a while, in creating a line of descendants, would at some point just become Earthlings. So I find it interesting how we kind of keep throwing these terms out there, because humans have this propensity to be arrogant, that we always view the world and the universe from ourselves and not from the other's point of views. Like when I talk about the Fermi paradox, where Enrico Fermi said, well, how can we, what's a good way to put it? That we are trying to state that there is extraterrestrial life out there in the universe without having any evidence that extraterrestrial life actually exists. Although many in the ufology community would argue that, yes, we do actually have plenty of evidence that extraterrestrial life does exist. But that aside, he's looking for, where's the spaceship from another planet that lands on the White House lawn and says, hey, we're from Alpha Centauri or something like that. Sirius, right? That hasn't happened. But here's the thing is, and this is where the arrogance of humanity comes into play, is that to the entire rest of the universe, we are the extraterrestrials. Okay. Yes. All the other planets to us are extraterrestrial, but to all of them, we are the extraterrestrials. So when you look at, and this just becomes a math problem, when you look at the Milky Way galaxy, which has billions and billions of stars, we know of at least one planet that has life, that has extraterrestrial life. That's us, right? So therefore, if you just take that ratio, 1 out of 400 billion trillion or whatever it is, and expand that across the billions and trillions of galaxies that are out there in the universe, then you can deduce, you just calculate that out to the approximate number of planets there might be, just based on what we know of this particular galaxy. So yeah, it's the arrogance of humanity when it comes to this. Okay, so we spent a lot of time on that. That was all really kind of the preamble for what we really want to discuss here, which are these beings in possible underground civilizations, okay, which, we can call them whatever we want at this point. So I'm going to start here at Montezuma's Well. We've talked about this before. I enjoy talking about Montezuma's Well. It's a fascinating location. It's beautiful there. I love visiting it, and it has some fantastic legends, and it's still extremely mysterious to this day. And we know for a fact there is something going on underground at this location, even if we can't get to it. So this is the well. This is in the Verde Valley, Arizona. So basically between Phoenix and Sedona, this is where this is at. And so I have a video clip that I'm going to play here from my 2023 visit. Back here at Montezuma's Well, I always find this place interesting. There's fascinating legends associated with it. Of course, you can see the cliff dwellings right into the walls. Similar to Montezuma's castle, so definitely an obvious relationship between here and the castle site. Of course, the legends are that those peoples originated from here. Now,
and just pop out of the ground here. Although in a way they did, in that when the Great Cataclysm happened, that they fled here, that this was an open hole, and there was a civilization of different peoples that lived here under the ground. So my former co-hostess Victoria Monday would talk about, hollowed earth, which is perfectly fine. These are the quote-unquote ant people. Somehow, some way, they resembled ants, and our colleague who passed away here not too long ago, Clifford Mahooty, Zuni Elder, had a lot of really interesting tales about the ant people that lived underground here. Basically, they helped these people survive during the cataclysm. And when things had subsided and came back and were normal, they literally came up out of the ground, and then they populated the different areas, notably downstream there at Montezuma's castle. Of course, you can cliff dwellings there. There are also dwellings here within the rock. Come back around here a little bit. You see the dwelling down there, and then actually all through here, you have the dwellings as well. Now, there's graffiti there. So a local photographer is trying to basically, do some marketing, but they had a beautiful scene of this area here where their origin stories were. Now, the water itself is actually very toxic. There's only 5 creatures that live within there that are original to here. You only find them here. They've basically evolved to survive the arsenic in the water here. And nobody can get down there. Anything that ever goes down, people, probes, whatever, always gets pushed back up. Okay, we're down here at the river. This water here is all the way back down to the castle area. And basically the water's there, which is on just the other side of this wall, that are a part of the, that feed, basically, the well, the same waters that feed here. So when they migrated southward up and down the river, they were still tapped into the same waters as their origin story. Now, something that's also really cool here, besides the fact that this is this very cool, serene area, the walls here have silver in them. So, if you look here, you see little veins of silver throughout. Now, of course, this being a national park, you can't mine the silver, but it's another conductive metal, another conductive mineral that feeds into the whole thing. You have the water, you have the limestone, now you even have silver. That makes this a really, really very special area, especially for those native indigenous tribes that have their origin stories that date back to here. So, what the truth of the matter is with that story, we know there's some sort of grain of truth to it. We're never going to know what all the details were, but we do know that there's a cataclysm. We know that there were people that came along to help and save other people. We do know that people lived underground in different areas of the world during those times. So it does make sense for that to have happened here as well.
Yeah, so let me give you a little close-up. It's hard to see in that particular video clip, but you can see better the veins of silver. And this is important because when we start looking at the story, okay, so the Great Cataclysm, which we're going to really refer to, the Great Flood. That was the last Great Cataclysm that we're aware of. In most world cultures talk about this thing, so we know it happened. Even though archaeology might try to argue, we know it happened. Otherwise, why would everybody be talking about it? So, if this, now traditional science says this is a sinkhole that is filled with water, but we know something's under there because, again, it pushes up. Something is pushing upward. You can't dive in there. They've tried to send divers down, nothing. They've tried to send probes and robots down there, nothing. It's pushed back up. They don't know how far down it goes. So something's down there. So if this was open at that time, when the cataclysm happened, and the ant people come along and say, hey, 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 come down here with us and we'll save you. Okay. Um, the waters come over that hole in the ground, it's going to fill it up, right? So, what sort of failsafe did they have in place there? Was that opening just to a passage to a larger network that would lead to places that would get them out of harm's way, above the water table, maybe? Or was it possibly an opening to some sort of portal or Stargate to another dimension? So when we talk about my work in Portals to the Stars, this is one of the ideas that I throw out there. Okay, we always think of Stargate as some sort of, well, we think of the movie and the television show, right? It's this big circular thing. When it turns on, we walk through it, and zoom, we're off through some sort of wormhole across the universe. But it doesn't have to be that. It could be to somewhere else here on Earth. It could be to another dimension, could be to another point in time. All of these different things are on the table. So, in the difference between a portal and a Stargate, portals are just naturally occurring in nature. A Stargate would be the ability to harness that that portal energy and be able to use it at will. Okay, so the idea here would be that the ant people basically took the people into what looks like a hole in the ground, but actually it was passing them into some other realm. And we see a lot of these different types of stories come out in different ways and different legends across the world. So, we hear stories of like the fairy legends where people got taken into the fairy realm and time worked very differently for them. The boy, I mentioned him in Alaska's Mysterious Triangle. I even mentioned him a bit here, or maybe I mentioned him in Travels Through Time. One of the last two books I mentioned him, the Urchin Hut of Alaska, where the boy was taken into the mountain, inside, right? And there he interacted with the Urchin Hut, and they eventually let him go. And the hunters found him out in the middle of nowhere, no tracks around him in the snow. But there he was. So it's a fascinating story. And this was just back in 2008. Like this is kind of recent. So did the ant people help the humans survive this cataclysm? Maybe took them into this other realm, this other dimension. And when finally the water subsided and all that was safe to come back out, then they populated the area, built their cliff dwellings. And, you're going to want to, if you just got flooded out like that, you're probably thinking, raising up the level of your house might be a good idea. Down the river, Montezuma's castle, it's not really a castle. It's a cliff dwelling that's way up there. That would make a lot of sense, for protection from those floods that your people's just experienced, that they just had to survive. So yeah, Montezuma's Well is a really, really fascinating location, and it's a beautiful walk too between the well, and then you come down here by the creek. I highly, highly recommend that. So another one that we can look at here is Derinkuyu. So this is in Turkey. This is, we know for a fact that humans dug this out. It's basically an underground city. And this could be evidence of underground civilizations hidden in plain sight, but far back in history. So this goes some 18 levels under the earth, more than 275 feet. Of course, we do know at House Humans, you can see, definitely humans carved this out. And it may have held as many as 20,000 people at one time. In several different points in history, this was a multi-use facility. So many cultures use this over the years. Now, we can't carbon date the rock and stone, but traditionally, many believe the work goes as far back as the Hittites, around 1200 BC. But the construction of it could go back even further. Okay, the Hittites the idea of the Hittites using this was they were under attack, and this would have been a place of refuge. But if you are under attack, well, you don't really have a whole lot of time to burrow out something like this, right? I mean, this takes years and years and years. I mean, decades, if not hundreds of years, to burrow out. It may have been done in phases, sure, but even like the initial digging of it, if you're trying to hide, like literally, hide your head in the sand to protect yourself, you don't have time to dig all of that out. It doesn't make sense. Now, what would make sense is if it already existed and they're like, hey, let's go hide in here. And they took refuge in there. That would make a lot of sense. Plus, if you're spending time digging out something, as massive as this, I mean, these are full-sized rooms, right? And you're covering all kinds of little niches and staircases and all of this stuff. You need to put that rubble someplace, right? It's not just going to disappear on its own. Of course, you're not hiding it underground because that's what you're digging it out from there. So you need to hide this rubble up on the surface somewhere. So, I mean, if you're trying to hide in secret, trying to get away from these guys because you're under attack, a good sign that, hey, there might be somebody hiding over here are like large mounds of rubble from this massive construction project underground, right? So in the blog article, I kind of make light of it. I make a reference to Shawshank Redemption, where Andy Dufresne is hiding the rock and stone and stuff in his trousers, and he's just kind of brushing it out into the courtyard of the prison. They're not doing that. They're not just hiding it in their pants and then coming up out of Darankuyu and you're walking around kind of brushing it out and spreading it around, that sort of thing. I mean, they're just going to be like huge buckets of rubble that they have to do something with. So this is something that people in the area are going to notice. So if they're on the run and their enemies are behind them and they're like, hey, it's a big mound of rubble over there, a couple big mounds. What the heck is going on over there? Oh, okay, those are the Hittites. Those are the guys we've been chasing down. I mean, yeah, so that doesn't make a lot of sense to me. But repurposing it, or coming across it, maybe they knew about it, maybe they heard some legends of the underground city, the abandoned underground city. Hey, let's go hide in there. Okay, cool. So it makes sense that it would be older. So the Hittites, their use of that was around 1200 BC. So we're talking about possibly further back into time that would have been used. And of course, the question always comes up, well, where are the artifacts? Where are because we can't carbonate rock, so you have to go by whatever artifacts you might be able to find, whatever organic remains might be there, or try to find a potsherd, that sort of thing, which always gets thrown out there for the Sphinx. When Robert Schoch and John Anthony West redated it, you got the archaeologists saying, well, where's the potsherd? Well, the entire enclosure is made of limestone. It's solid, and was used for ceremonial purposes for thousands and thousands of years. So old potsherds, they're going to be cleaned out of there. Not that somebody's going to try to use the potsherd, but especially like the rededication of it, like the dream stele is a stele commemorating the restoration of the work. So all that pageantry and all that, they're going to clean the area out and make it look beautiful. Well, okay, I'm not saying that sort of pageantry is going on in Darankuyu, but you have to think about this. People are living in here for long periods of time, right? And they're probably expanding as they go. Well, as they're doing that and they're living, I mean, they are going to clean up after themselves. And as they're, people are repurposing, okay, this is a great place for us to be able to live and take refuge for a while. We're going to call this home. Well, I mean, what do I do when I first come into a new home, right? When I first moved into here, I mean, even though there's no furniture and all of that, the first thing that I'm doing is I'm cleaning the house, even though it was already cleaned by the previous homeowners, and I'm wiping down the counters, I'm wiping out the refrigerator, I'm vacuuming the floors, I'm cleaning up to make it a home. It's kind of what humans do, right? So a lot of that stuff is going to be gone. It's going to be cleared out. As people are digging further and further into these caverns like this, um, and maybe they're using their buckets or whatever the heck it is that they're using for tools. Some of that is going to dribble out along the way. I mean, we're talking like rocks and stone and that sort of stuff. Well, as you're bringing that up and you're dribbling it along the hallways and into different chambers and stuff like that, somebody's going to come along behind them. Hey, you guys are making a mess down here. Let's sweep it up, clean it out. Yeah. So, that makes it really tough to try to date. The only thing that is, with any organics that are found, this is as far back as we can date. This is like the newest or most recent time it was used, that sort of thing. Like with trying to date Göbekli Tepe, many people think that goes back even further. Again, a temple site that would have been cleaned, revered, all the pageantry and everything. So the artifacts found there that you can actually date, that would have been its latest usage, not necessarily the earliest. So that always becomes difficult. That's why in a lot of times when I write about these sorts of things or get on here and talk about it, I always use the term at least. Okay. So this goes back to at least 1200 BC. But again, it can go back even further and further and further. We don't know. So how far back do some of these, underground civilizations, how far back do they go, right? Well, what's interesting is I correlated this, not necessarily this particular site like Derinkuyu or even Montezuma as well, but when we start looking at civilizations that did live underground or even in caves, right? We can date a lot of that back to, we have the cave paintings and we have the organics there, to about 40,000 years ago. The caves in like Spain and France, those areas of the world, we find these amazing cave paintings that go back to around that time. Why is that significant? I talked about this in Alaska's Mysterious Triangle. Okay, the pole shift. The last magnetic pole shift was about 42,000 years ago. What do I mean by pole shift? Well, the Earth's magnetic poles, north and south, move. The North Pole magnetic north moves a lot. We've actually been tracking that since like 1700s, and you can look up a variety of different maps on there. I should have included one here of how that pole is really moving toward the northwest, like across Canada, kind of on a line for Siberia. But they have, through, if you can believe this, some well-preserved ancient trees, they were able to determine the last pole shift, basically the North Pole becoming the South Pole and the South Pole becoming the North Pole, flipping like that. And it doesn't just happen overnight, like boom. It takes some time. So it kind of meandered down through the Americas, like New York and so forth, until it finally flipped, and took a little bit of time to do that. And it stayed flipped for 400 years. 400 years is a while, okay? You think 400 years ago, what was going on? It's, Shakespeare's first folio, was just published and things like this. It's a long time ago. So when that happened, scientists believe that the Earth's protective magnetic shield would have been in flux down to as much as 6% of its current state, causing dramatic climate change. The solar wind from the sun would have pounded the earth with radiation and likely causing the extinction of many species. The air would have been more ionized, creating far more electrical storms and aurora sightings all over the earth. According to evolutionary biologist Alan Cooper with Blue Sky Genetics in the South Australian Museum, he stated early humans around the world would have seen amazing auroras, shimmering veils, and sheets across the sky. It must have seemed like the end of days. So again, that's science. That's from information they've picked up on these well-preserved ancient trees. So yeah, about 40,000 years ago, you have the pole shift, the Earth's magnetic shield going down to about 6%. Yes, that would have created some massive climate change. Okay, very natural climate change, which yeah, it happens. We always have climate change. That's we can't prevent it. We can prevent human-induced climate change, but there are things that happen naturally that there's nothing we can do about, like that. So climate would have changed. It would have been very difficult to go outside during the day. You would have gotten absolutely fried. They didn't have sunblock back then. That you would have needed like SPF 1000 or whatever to go out there in those conditions. So they would have spent most of their daytime in shelter. So this is where, we find a lot of those cave dwellers. They had to spend time in these caves to protect themselves. And a place like Derinkuyu, I'm not saying it's necessarily 40,000 something years old, but it would have made sense. And 400 years to carve out something like that also makes sense. Not, running for our lives from another culture, having, oh, hey, it's, something happened with the sun. We're getting fried. I'm not really sure what's going on, and they might not have known. Sure, they would have had legends and lore and myth and all that to try to explain what happened, and that's where we can look at history and say something happened here. But to create an underground city would make a lot more sense. That would protect them from the elements above. So other places we can look, because we are kind of winding down here a little bit. So Antarctica, we've talked about this earlier this year as well. Did a nice feature on Antarctica, which I hadn't really done before. In passing in a couple different areas, talked about it a bit in Alaska's Mysterious Triangle, if you can believe that. But yes, I related Antarctica to Alaska. And again, opposite sides of the globe, right? North and south. But we explored earlier this year the Admiral Byrd story. Okay. Admiral Richard E. Byrd, famous explorer of the Antarctic, Operation High Jump, of course, was the largest expedition ever to Antarctica. Highly, highly renowned for his work of being the first to fly over the North Pole and the first to fly over the South Pole. He helped to set up weather monitoring installations there, all kinds of work that he did down there in Antarctica. Well, after he passed, and this is the story, this is the legend of Admiral Byrd. His son found his journal, or found a journal, in which, most of it was just, logging of taking a flight down here and, transporting somebody down there. And, we've made arrangements to set up this station there, that sort of stuff. And just kind of basic daily log, flight log. I'm flying over this marker, that sort of stuff. And all of a sudden, in the middle of this flight log, there's a fantastic story about how he's flying near the South Pole and all of a sudden notices this giant cavernous area that is large enough for him to fly his plane into the earth. It's huge, wide open like this. So it's an AI image that I had done up over the summer to tell the story. I included in the book as well. Um, so as he's flying into this giant cavern and exploring, all of a sudden the snow gives way to vegetation. And as he's getting deeper, he sees ahead of himself this crystalline city that's just like shimmering. It's like beautiful. And then he notices these flying discs, disc shaped objects that are flying in the air. And he says that they take remote control of his plane, lower it to the ground. And this contingency of beings comes to his plane. He gets out and they take him to a chamber where there is the master, quote unquote, the master. And the master wants Admiral Byrd to deliver a message back to the human leaders, to the US government, that, hey, we don't like what's going on with your nuclear testing. You need to stop. This is not good. Very, very disappointed humanity. And they let him go, and he flies back out. Now, of course, he didn't make that story public. When he took it to, when he had his debriefing afterward back in Washington after the mission was done, he presented this. And he was told to not mention it publicly for national security purposes and the sake of humanity. That's it. So he follows orders, doesn't say anything about it publicly. And because he didn't say anything about it publicly, we only have the story of the journal to go off of. So a lot of people just dismiss it out of hand. But how do we know? So it's an interesting tale. I get it. And highly speculative. Okay, large cavern in Alaska. And this has caused a lot of people to say, there's big, giant, gaping holes on like the North and South Pole, and you can fly in there, and there's an inner sun and all this. No, I don't believe in that whole hollow earth sort of thing. I mentioned it a little bit there in that video clip, hollowed earth, that Victoria likes to talk about. My co-host is on Edge of the Rabbit Hole. Basically, the idea that there are large places in the earth, large magma chambers, lava tubes, these sorts of things that could very readily provide enough space for underground civilizations to live and thrive. Makes complete sense, actually. So this could be one of those that Admiral Byrd flew into. Now, what about the vegetation? We're in Antarctica, stark, bleak. I mean, really nothing grows there. It did once, though. We do know that millions of years ago, that Antarctica was once a lush jungle. We have found, doing ice core samples, we have found an ancient jungle there under the ice. We do know that there has been vegetation that has grown on Antarctica in the past. Okay, fine. Vegetation once grew on there, but you need some heat to be able to grow. Well, this is true. There's geothermal heating in Antarctica, okay? And we did discuss this back during the summer too. So just very briefly, you have Lake Vostok, okay? Lake Vostok is it's about the same size as Lake Ontario, one of our Great Lakes, and about twice as deep. Okay, it's far, far deeper. And what they have learned about it, for one, is there are some microorganisms living in there. It's just small core samples that they've taken, and so there's not if there's larger things in the water, they wouldn't be able to. They're not ice fishing, so they wouldn't be able to bring those things up. But they do know that there is life within these waters, and it's under about 2.5 miles of ice, and it's water, which tells us that there is geothermal heating under that ice there that is causing this lake to exist, for there to be liquid water down there. So okay, that tells us right there is geothermal heating there in Antarctica that could provide the heat for things like this vegetation to grow, for there to be beings that are living within some deep recesses of the earth there. it's actually physically possible. So when somebody like, Albert K. Bender comes along and tells this fantastic story in the 1950s about how he had interacted with these beings, basically the story is, he was he had founded the UFO, or not the UFO, the Flying Saucer Bureau, and all of a sudden, after a year, he blew this thing up big in a year, and all of a sudden closed it down. And he didn't talk about it. Finally, did in the 60s. So he established that in 52. In the 60s, he's talking about it in a book, Flying Saucers and the Three Men. And he described that he came home one day and saw in his bedroom, or basically morphing through the wall in his bedroom, 3 dark, shadowy beings wearing hats with glowing eyes and smelling of sulfur. When I first heard this story years ago, I was like, oh, these are the shadow people. They're the hat wearing beings. Other people hearing the story say, oh, these are the men in black. Albert K. Bender said, no, these were extraterrestrials. They were here on a 15-year mission to acquire resources from Antarctica. And once they were done harvesting those resources, they were off. And that's why he was able to write about it again, or why he was able to write about it then, was because they were now gone. And they basically had sworn him to secrecy. They told him he had to stop his UFO research. So, underground base in Antarctica, and it would have to be something that could stain life forms. So is that, some of these underground areas, you got the geothermal heating there, and that would provide enough for beings even from another planet to be able to survive and harvest whatever they would need. So it gives us a lot more to talk about with the Admiral Byrd story. Was it, if you go flying over the South Pole these days, which your average person can't do, are you going to find that giant hole in the ground? Or is it one of those, kind of like what we were talking about with Montezuma as well, where maybe it wasn't necessarily physical in this dimension? Perhaps he had passed through some sort of portal or stargate that had opened up to him, and there talk to these beings, talk to the master within another dimension. Now, and of course, when he flew back out, they closed it behind him. But even if they are in another dimension on this planet, okay, anything that we do here in our dimension is still going to affect them. You're still bound by the fact that we are on this physical ball, orbiting around our sun. So what we do affects them, and so they would be very concerned, even if they're living a completely separate existence from us in a different dimension, and pretty much don't care about us whatsoever. Once we start affecting the planet on which they're living, once we start blowing stuff up of that sort of magnitude, that's going to affect them even in another dimension. So it makes sense that, hey, you guys need to knock that off up there. And for them to, and who better than this well-respected admiral, this emissary that has come to Antarctica many, many times, right? So they're familiar with him. They know he's highly respected in the U.S. government. So we'll bring him down here, talk to him, and then send him back with the message. It makes sense. So now I did, at the very end of that blog article that I posted on Monday, mention that we may see evidence of ancient underground civilizations in the Valley of the Kings in Egypt. What did I mean by that? Well, I'm going to tease you on that one. So I'm saving that. I mentioned the very beginning of the broadcast. Whenever I say, hey, join us at the Connected Universe portal, I've got all of this great material that's within it. And I talk about this all the time too. I have the all that Egypt footage, all that Egypt information that is back there. And so I am still, this has been a long summer and fall of getting the new book put together and published and all that. So I've kind of slowly been rolling out the videos from this year's Egypt tour and haven't gotten around to the Valley of the Kings yet. So I'm not going to spoil that just yet. What I will say is the last one that I just posted was on the Temple of Seti at Abydos. 36 minutes of exploring the stargates there. The stargates, the room of ships, so much there. So come check that out. But Valley of the Kings is I've got a few more videos until that, like 2 or 3 more videos, and we'll have the Valley of the Kings. And so I will explain it a bit in that particular video. So yeah, I'm gonna leave that as a teaser. So come on, join us, connecteduniverseportal.com and jump onto that. So all right. So I want to thank everybody for tuning in this evening for this pre-recorded interactive class, non-interactive class on the Secret Library of the Connected Universe. Again, I've been saying, join us, connecteduniverseportal.com. So much that is back there. And yeah, you can find, I'll have all the links below here in the description to, well, Portals to the Stars, of course, to the blog articles that I mentioned, to the class that we did earlier this year on the Harvard research paper. So lots of stuff out there for you to check out. I'll put those links down below. All right, everybody. Till next time, time really exists.